So my name is Suzanne Brandt, and I'm the president here at FNTI. And FNTI was established in 1985 for the sole purpose of educating First Nations people and communities, or to build capacity within our communities.
You know, when you look back at the history of FNTI, you know, developing or coming out of the 80s, and we saw it originally, you know, under the, I want to call it like under the direction of, or under the creation of individuals from the communities and abroad that were really considering or working on developing a skilled labor base to help, you know, to get jobs and to help within the community, but at the same time to, you know, to provide them with the opportunities to have a degree and to have a certain knowledge and skills. That was kind of what it was originally formulated as. And it served a purpose at the time, and at the same time, I think in just the gradual evolution of the institution itself, I think FNTI moved from being sort of more interested in meeting the demands of the labor market, really then starting to look at the essence of the knowledge and the things that they were engaging with, and the quality of students that were coming forward.
Well, my name is Ralph Brandt. I currently live in Gatineau, Quebec. I'm originally from this community. I spent the first 18 years of my life here, and my role now is the chair of the board of directors. I was a member of the board for a couple of years. I think it's been about 4 years that I've been the chair of the board of directors. Well, we currently have 7 board members, all of whom are members of the Tyendinaga community. Well, FNTI provides an opportunity for kids, learners, to come to the reserve and quite possibly be in their home environment rather than be in a large non-Indigenous training center where they sometimes get lost and don't learn about their own culture.
Bonjour, and deno maganaduk. Wapshge o gitadakwa an ang Indigenous cause, wab nang Indigenous cause, moose do dem, bigtagong nishnabeg donjaba, kirigon zibi donjaba, nishnabeg kwayanda. So greetings, all my relatives. My name is Melanie Goodchild, and I'm Moose Clan from Bigtagong Nishnabeg First Nation and Kirigon Zibi First Nation. Well, I'm pretty lucky. I have the opportunity to work with different organizations, institutions, corporations, nonprofit organizations, and I often work in a cross-cultural context. In other words, with mainstream organizations that are looking to engage with Indigenous knowledge systems. What I love and where my passion is actually, at an institution like FNTI, because it's Indigenous governed, Indigenous led, it serves our communities. I used to work for a tribal council on suicide prevention. You know, I've worked for our communities like my whole career. And what FNTI, I think, has at its core are teachings specific to this place. We've kind of been introduced to a pan-Indigenous worldview in mainstream institutions, like as if there's an Indigenous knowledge, and that's a noun. Well, it's not a noun. There are Indigenous knowledges, Indigenous knowledge systems, and there's ways of knowing. And even our sources of knowledge, and I see that here, which is quite common across Turtle Island from what I've seen, our sources of knowledge are not the typical sources of knowledge that you see in mainstream educational settings. So while we can capture teachings, for example, in a book, and books are important, and journal articles and all of that, text is important, but in mainstream institutions, that's the most important. That's one of the only valid sources. Is it cited? Is it something you can cite? At FNTI and other Indigenous institutes, it's encoded in our language and our prophecies. It's encoded in the way that we hear the songs. It's encoded in wampum belts. It's encoded in teachings. And so those sources of knowledge are valid. You don't have to explain yourself, I think, as a student when you say, I'm gonna even if you come into class and say, I dreamt of a song last night, and I'm going to play this for you, and it's part of your assignment. I think that's validated here, and it's centered, whereas in some university settings, and it's been my experience personally as a student in mainstream universities, that's not considered valid knowledge, and you have to fight and do that labor and make the case. Even to this day, with Truth and Reconciliation and all of that happening, I think the real source of knowledge and cultural revitalization lies in Indigenous institutions, because it's not just in the curriculum and the pedagogy, which is important, but it's actually in the very foundation, the business model, and that's where I think FNTI is.
Well, I think, one important piece to recognize, I think, right off the bat is that, Tyndall is a very special and unique place, it being the birthplace of the peacemaker. Just down here, just a short ways away at Eagle Hill. To recognize the authority of that, really puts FNTI and Tyndall really on the map for us as Haudenosaunee people. And in particular, looking at, FNTI's role in really being able to be the facilitators of positive change. I think that, that FNTI assuming its rightful position as being I guess I want to call it a repository of traditional teachings and knowledge really speaks well of Suzanne's connection as president to the larger community. Many of the VPs and many of the program coordinators within FNTI are, and as many of the staff as well, are well connected to other communities and to knowledge holders. And to see those knowledge holders, come forward to be able to share their perspectives, their teachings, and to use that as kind of I want to call it the fuel that really works to ignite the learners. To me, that speaks well of the representation of the organization as fundamental within our well-being and our sovereignty as the Haudenosaunee. But in particular, the necessity of engaging and supporting communities, Haudenosaunee communities in particular, across the country. I think that provides a really unique role that hasn't really been articulated well and hasn't really been fostered as well as it should be right now. And I think FNTI is meeting a really unique need right at this current time, in 2019, as that's been addressing a lot of the needs of the complex needs of communities throughout all of Ontario, really. So you're pulling in issues around us as the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabeg peoples, Oji-Cree peoples, and Mushkegowuk peoples, and you're pulling even Métis and even Inuit students that have come here. You're pulling in a multiplicity of different cultural backgrounds and cultural identities and trying to house them here to address the immediate needs in communities. As that process, I think, begins to kind of really expand and really evolve into a very well-organized and very professional process of knowledge generation and collaboration, it's my hope to see other institutions form within those areas. And as those institutions continue to evolve and continue to gain strength, they'll serve the immediate needs of their communities and represent their own cultural integrity. But I think that the unique part of it is FNTI has the opportunity to really become a leader in terms of its recognition and support, but at the same time, its ability to accredit the learning as degree granting institutions, I think is a really unique step forward.
So my name is Adam Hopkins. I'm from the Delaware Nation, Moravian town. So I'm the Vice President of Enrollment, Management, and Student Services here at First Nations Technical Institute. The majority of our staff here at FNTI are identify as being Indigenous. Many from Tyndall, but we have people that come from as far as Kingston and Peterborough and Trenton that commute here for the day. A lot of pretty good mix of Mohawk folks and Anishinaabe folks that work here, but I'd say about 95% of our employees are Indigenous. That includes staff and faculty.
Our faculty, we try to ensure that our faculty are Indigenous. People want to see themselves in the classroom. When an instructor is teaching and they're sharing about their experiences or relating a certain topic, they're able to draw upon Indigenous experience to share with the learner. And that makes a huge, it makes a huge difference to that learner's success.
The Aboriginal community has a lot to offer, like everybody. just there's so much to offer, and there's so much knowledge within the community. And even just the whole the programmings and the way the school is set up. It's not, the school isn't set up like a regular institution. It's not somebody, standing up in front of the class where a lot of people would feel intimidated. And we all, we sit in a circle, we do the smudging, we connect with everybody, we work together. It's a really great atmosphere. It's not somebody standing up in an auditorium of 100 people, or it's just a really great experience. It's a really great environment. And I've learned a lot.
It's in the community, and it's got local learning, which is good. And the Aboriginal content, which is very important to me as a person, as I'm from Newfoundland with the Mi'kmaq Nation back home. And I find that having the Aboriginal content involved with it helps give knowledge, because if I want to work in the field and with the people that from my past, that I need to know that information.
So the average age of our learners is early to mid 30s. So that's the average age. So I mean, that's very different from any mainstream university or college, which are, their average age is probably 17 or 18 or 19. Not to say that there's not exceptions of mature learners, but our average age, I believe, is 32 or 33. And so, kind of with that in mind, our marketing outreach is to people who, well, from that age, but I mean, people that are in that age group, typically are early or mid-career, typically have some sort of family commitments, whether it's a partner or children. And so the marketing efforts focus on those groups of people, and we do outreach to where those types of people in that age and demographic are going. And, if it's sometimes when we're working and marketing a program directly in Indigenous community, we know that, I'll just name a community specifically. So we know that in Walpole Island, when we deliver a program, that people, there's a community newsletter, and people read it, and it's regular and it's popular. And so that's where we advertise, and it's a direct way to get our message into homes in that community. Other communities don't have a regular newsletter or don't utilize social media. So I guess the approach depends on the community itself. But the one thing that we found is very, very successful is social media, Facebook specifically. Indigenous communities utilize Facebook a lot. It's good for us too, because we can track its efficacy. And we can respond to engagement very quickly, and it's also very cost effective for us. It's free.
So some of the programs that we offer are social programs. So we have a social service worker program that can lead into a bachelor's of social work and then on into a master's of social work. And we have health programs, so a PSW or personal support worker program. And then we have other programs in the governance and leadership areas of public administration and governance, which is a degree program, and a master's program in professional masters of public administration. And then we have a full program that runs at the airport, which is an aviation technology program, and it's 3 years. And our students come and they actually reside at the airport, so we have a residence there where the students can stay. And they learn to fly. They get 250 hours of flight time in, and in their third year they can specialize in commercial pilot or training, and what's the other one? That's when they learn float pilots. So we have a multitude of programs that we offer.
When it comes to Indigenous institutes that formed back in the 80s, they were seen basically as a place or a facility to kind of enable students to be able to stay in communities and at the same time to be able to get degrees. So many college and university partners came on board, and they we're able to deliver courses inside of the community. So a lot of students that took those courses didn't have to leave the community to get their education. It was a great opportunity for them, and at the same time, you know, there was a growing demand because of the, I would say, amongst Indigenous peoples, a consciousness that was raising to talk about the recognition of who we were, what our history was, you know, what's the road ahead, what is our culture, our cultural teachings. So gradually, FNTI and other Indigenous institutes started to take over a lot of those programming developments and started to infuse those delivery of those courses with our own instructors, and at the same time add a cultural component into it.
All of our programs have Indigenous learning outcomes incorporated into them. So we take that Indigenous knowledge and we bridge it with you know, the requirements of mainstream. All of our programs are accredited through colleges and university partnerships. So we have to meet the quality assurance pieces of those colleges and the universities and ensure that all of our programs you know, have meeting the employability skills.
I've been finding that as we progress and as we go through the institutional accreditation process and as we go through the program accreditation process, that it's been really easy to get pulled into structuring and building and doing things like mainstream institutions. Not that that's a bad thing necessarily, but right now is kind of a really critical time to be clear about what we're doing and how we're differentiating ourselves from the rest of the sector. And you know, I mean, if we're just delivering a existing programming in a different way or a different place, I mean, I don't know, is that a really good reason to have kind of this third pillar? I don't think so. You know, I think we do know how we differentiate ourselves from the rest of the sector. I know how we know we're different. I know that our model works because our success rate is so good and our students are doing such incredible things all throughout the country. But the visit from this scholar, Malini, really, I think, was good for the team to hear about how we can think about the work that we're doing, the work that we need to do in 5 years, and 10 years, and 15 years, and really structure and really be deliberate about differentiating ourselves and making sure that we're just not recreating something that already exists.
So this week I've spent a few days with the leadership team here at FNTI in Tyendinaga, Mohawk Territory. I'm a guest here. It's quite a privilege actually to work with the team at FNTI. So I've been here for about 4 days. In the first 3 days I was working with the team, which included Suzanne, it included some of the VP, staff, management here at FNTI. And we went through a number of exercises. In the first day, we just started systems mapping. And what systems mapping does is it allows, you know, people within a system to step back, to actually take a moment, which they don't often have an opportunity to do, to step back and look at the complexity of the system within which they are trying to do their daily, you know, their daily tasks. I have the opportunity to work with First Nations across the country, across Turtle Island, and I think, you know, my colleague Dan at Trent University, Dr. Dan Longboat, he invited me here and introduced me to the team at FNTI because they are big picture thinkers, holistic thinkers. They're quite progressive, and right now they're talking about changing the world, and that's speaking my language. So in social innovation, we look at pathways to large-scale transformative change, and I think FNTI in itself, through its work and also through its vision for the future, is part of that large-scale transformative change for Indigenous peoples. So I'm just really happy to be a part of that, to bring tools and methodologies that we use in systems thinking to help with the planning, to look at, you know, all of the moving parts, and also to try to visualize the complexity of an organization like FNTI, but also the complexity of all of the different systems that FNTI is a part of at different scales, a scale below and a scale above. So society, but even a scale above that globally. You know, where does FNTI fit? Where does Indigenous education fit? And what does Indigenous education look like in this day and age?
Some of the things that make FNTI very unique as an Indigenous institute, and even unique in comparison to some of the other Indigenous institutes in Ontario or across Canada, is that we offer our programs in an intense professional mode. One of the things with the intense professional mode of delivery is that it allows the learner to come into an educational setting for 1 week, and then they can go back into their communities. And this gives them an opportunity to fulfill their responsibilities, their community commitments, their family commitments, and yet at the same time get their education. So they can come into a program for 1 week, and then they can go back and spend the time and meet their commitments that they have within community.
Like, yeah, it is a condensed course, but at the same time, the weeks that we are not in class, I get to actually set my own schedule, meaning I can still have time for work and other things, but I also still have time for all my schoolwork.
So we deliver programming all over the province. So right now we're in Walpole Island, in Oneida, in Toronto, in Orillia, Orama, Cochrane, and Tyndonega. I think I've got everyone. So we're kind of all over the province. So each of those spots, we deliver one program, and that program, for the most part, stays there. It's all delivered in those locations. And so what we do is we typically try to find an instructor, a student success person, and an elder from those communities, and they're actually the ones that deliver that programming. And so the programming and how it's structured, the way we call it is, intense professional mode. And so what that means is that a 2-year college diploma still takes 2 years, but it's delivered in intense mode. So what that means is that 1 week a month, our learners go to school for a full week, so 40 hours in the week, and that 1 week represents a full course. And so the whole idea behind that is that we're delivering it in the community, so it allows the people, our students, to stay in the community, to keep their commitments to family, to work, to whatever else, and it doesn't force them to leave and leave behind all of those commitments.
So FNTI has graduates in First Nations communities across Canada. We have had a broad reach in many communities across Canada, including Manitoba, BC, Nunavut, Iqaluit, New Brunswick, Labrador. We have graduates across Canada, and so the opportunity for us to reach into those communities to educate has been incredible, and we will continue to reach out across into those communities. If a student wants to come here, then we support and we bring them to here to educate them. And in Ontario, we've served over 102 First Nations communities, and we know that eventually we will have served all of the First Nations communities in Ontario. But more importantly, our outreach is to reach people from across Canada, from across the world, really. FNTI puts a high value on relearning Indigenous language. We believe that language diversity is really, really important. And so we have worked very hard in the Institute to revitalize language. One of the things you'll see when you go to our website is that we have 3 languages that our website has been translated into 3 different languages. We also have worked on a virtual reality project where we now can, you put on the goggles, and we've got harvesting of wild rice, and it's a virtual reality video that's a part of our curriculum, and it's all in Anishinaabe language. We've got, there's 12 videos, and we've got Mohawk on there, and you're learning about lying corn, and it's all again in the language. We're talking about gardening. And so language at FNTI, learning and revitalizing our Indigenous languages, is a very, very important piece of our existence, as Indigenous people. So we want to make sure that we're spending the time assisting our learners to learn their languages And one of the things that we're doing is we've got a new Bachelor's of Education program that we're working on, that we're supporting those immersion programs that are in the communities and allowing those students to come in and get their Bachelor's of Education so they can continue to teach those languages that they're learning. So there are some key elements within FNTI that we want to make sure, that we focus on, and language development and language revitalization is one of those areas.
I think some of our learners struggle with where to place themselves in relation to their culture. So they come here from all different communities, and some of our learners are very traditional, want to engage in ceremony, want to talk about Indigenous issues and reconciliation and healing, and other learners don't really know where to place themselves. So they come in and they're maybe not comfortable in ceremony just yet. They're recovering their culture. Maybe they don't even know really a whole lot about their culture, but they're drawn to come here. So we accept any sort of perspective, and if a learner comes here with questions, then we would foster that learning, help them grow through that experience.
I'm Eddie Goff. I'm from Mississauga, 37 years old. My Indigenous path it started approximately a year and a half ago when I first stepped in and started learning about my culture. I was adopted at a very early age, at the age of 6 months old, and it was just something that I never had the opportunity to learn about myself, and I guess at times it's created a lot of struggle with my own identity growing up. But I recently, found some mentors, and they took me under their wing, and I can feel myself growing and healing as an Indigenous man. I often say, my adopted family got applied for the status card for me, and that was my only identity that I had to our culture. I joke around saying the only time I was Native was when I went in the Best Buy to buy a TV to save the tax, and now it's it's everything. I've been learning so much. I've been learning about our medicines. I've been learning from our elders. I've been doing a lot of ceremonies. I've done a couple sweat lodges. So far, I'm looking into doing a fast coming up in the future, and the shake tent, and it's just I've had my struggles in life, and this is definitely I'm truly healing now, where I was always looking for some way to heal, and then nothing really made sense to me personally. I couldn't connect with it, and this is my connection, and this is my personal growth. And I guess through FNTI, I guess I've always had these qualities in me, and I guess a purpose. I've always known I wanted to help people with their emotions and mental conditions, because that's something that I've had my struggles with, and FNTI is the first step in that direction, right?
So my exposure to kind of the daily life here at FNTI has only been limited to this week, but I can, just sort of personally speak to the fact that I've seen a lot of elders here, and I've met elders, and the hospitality has been really warm and embracing. I've met a lot of the staff. I've met students. I went to a class this morning, and everybody greeted me with a big smile, hugs. If you're in a toxic environment, that's not the kind of welcome that you get. And so, at least from what I can see, I think there's a tremendous amount of pride here. And just meeting I met an auntie this morning and an uncle, and they both gave me big hugs. And one of the elders that stopped by on day one came over and gave me a big hug, and she says, "You have a beautiful aura, Mulaney, and I'm really happy you're here." And that made me feel good, because it is a privilege to be here when I'm from a culture that's different than this community, to be embraced and to know that we're all related, and that we're all striving for the same things, and that we need to work together, and to have that space open. That I was invited here, and invited here without them not being entirely, I don't think they were, and most people aren't, we're not entirely clear what social innovation and systems thinking has to offer. We know it's got potential. And then we explored that together, and so there was a trust that I would come in here and hold that space, and hopefully hold it with integrity, where culture is the heart of the systems thinking that we were doing in those processes this week. And I could see in the staff and the commitment of, you know, some of the VPs when they were frustrated on behalf of students, for example, in terms of funding. You could see that came from the heart. You know, it wasn't purely an intellectual process when we were here together this week. It really was a spiritual and emotional process as well. And I think that's pretty reflective of, you know, the leadership then of where FNTI is and where it's going.
One of the things that we are very conscious of is that we ensure that our students have access to ceremony. So we do our openings. So in Haudenosaunee culture and tradition, we have a Thanksgiving address that we use and we do at our board meetings, in our staff meetings, in our leadership meetings. It reinforces, the Thanksgiving address reinforces again our relationship to the natural world. So we never lose our focus of why we even exist as a human being, and that we have to maintain those relations, that they're the number one, that it has number one importance to us, because without those relationships we won't exist.
Ononane oksane gohnuane hunzage ononane enagano guadi zenigane gaeni gaurage. Zenigane yeti sotogora di veros. Ua unizarade ziniwahnizares. Sugwatsia jokineka garakwa.
So a key element of FNTI is that we have ceremony, and the Thanksgiving address is one of those ceremonies. We also burn tobacco. We have tobacco burning ceremonies. We do smudging. There are many elements within the organization that help to tie us back to our relationships and our responsibilities, and ceremony is one of them.
Well, at first they started out, you know, calling me an elder, and that's kind of how I was brought on board as an elder. But I don't especially like that title because in mainstream, elder is, they put you on a pedestal, and in the way of responsibilities, how they look at you is different. And so it isn't that I don't respect that or appreciate that or whatever, but my first I don't know, thought or feeling about it is that I'm a grandmother. I'm a grandmother first. So my title now is Culture Advisor, and I'm kind of okay with that. I remember my first class, the SSW class, and it was with Marianne and Mac, and we actually did a team teaching. Oh, and that was so powerful. And so I remember when the students first came in, they were kind of like reluctant to really, you know, embrace what we were sharing. And then all of a sudden, in you know, a short time, you could see them starting to change their, you know, their spirit and their aura. Everything was changing about them, and it was so exciting. And so at the end of graduation, or at the end of the classes and they were graduating, they were like 95% different people, and the students even said, you know, that they weren't the same, and they, you know, so it was such a gift to me personally, you know, to see them grow, and I knew then, you know, this is the right track. I'm on the right track, and so it's so exciting to see how the students, I guess you'd say, transform, you know, to really who they are.
I believe that the transformational part of it comes as a result of the fact that students get an understanding about their culture, about their spirituality, about their relationships with the natural world, their relationships with each other, how important it is, and that those teachings that have been a part of our culture for many, many generations has some real life values today. And those real life values, talk about our humanness, and it also has a, the profoundness, I guess, of understanding that, we are part of a larger process, and that my little life, as insignificant as it may be, really has huge impacts on other individuals and the natural world as we understand it. And so that transformational process is becoming aware, I believe, of all the positiveness of their teachings and of teachings of Indigenous teachings, and applying it to themselves.
So Indigenous identity for me, what it means to me is that I want to know my purpose. I want to know what my belonging is within my community. I want to have some meaning for myself. And by having my identity, it kind of sets my foundation for my lifestyle, for my living, for my education.
I often look at FNTI not as necessarily me getting an education, but as also, I look at it as therapy for myself. And I see, I'm starting to meet a lot of Indigenous people that I haven't known a lot within my life, and we've all had our struggles, but I've only known them for approximately 4 months, and it's creating a sense of family, like a family that I didn't know that I was capable of being a part of, which was all about love, all about healing, all about support. And that's what I feel when I walk in these doors, and that's something that was painfully missing for a long time.
I think my favorite part would be the relationships that you build here, because there's not that many people. So it's a lot easier to become closer with the people in your class, your teachers.
To do anything good for yourself, you need to heal. And any way to heal, you need knowledge. And to be able to have knowledge, you need to be surrounded by very knowledgeable people. FNTI has that. I've never had great mentors until I came here, and they provided me with great tools, and everybody needs to have that experience.
Yeah, so this idea of braiding learning with healing really doesn't exist anywhere else. Public education in Ontario, and really most places in the world, is this cog in the wheel philosophy that most of what's offered in mainstream universities and colleges are direct kind of vocational outcome, and that's really how the programs have been structured and developed. And you'll notice that in most universities and colleges, all the new programs are structured in the same way, that it's you go into a program and it's got a very direct route to a career once you graduate. But the problem with that is that if you're only focusing on vocational outcomes, you really don't have any time to focus on the student's well-being, on the student's holistic health. And so this idea of braiding learning with healing, it just doesn't exist anywhere else. And it's a philosophy that we've held here, that we've developed, that we've not quite perfected, but are getting close to that. But that we've maintained is a good formula to make sure that our students are successful. Not just our Indigenous students, but any student would benefit from this model.
We provide what I would consider cutting-edge information. All the tools for you to, as an addictions worker, to operate in the addictions and mental health field, and not just operate, to have confidence in your role there. But the other side of that is, as I had mentioned earlier, is the the necessity for students to understand where they are in their own healing process. It's often been said that we can't take anybody any further than we've gone ourselves, and it really stands true, you know, working in this field. And it's imperative then that we have the opportunity to scrutinize ourselves, in a healthy way, to understand kind of where we are. Some of these students that we have had come into the program, you know, have had some really traumatic life experiences, and we encourage them to learn from their traumatic life experiences, because that's a healing curve, that's a healing process for anybody. And having some insights and understanding of their experiences becomes an asset then for them. And it's one of the things that I do personally when I'm working with when I'm instructing is really emphasize that the experiences can be very beneficial, and that those experiences are probably going to be the same experiences that your clients are going to have. And that if we have some understanding and we have insights, if we've done healing from that, then it just puts us in a better place, you know, to relate to our clients. We all need to heal, and no matter what, at any age, at any stage, things happen. And so we sometimes have to question what's going on and what did I learn from that. It just, I believe, makes us better people, and I often talk about us being the best people that we possibly can, you know, based on our traditional teachings, based upon what we can carry, what we understand, the reality of our lives, the reality of our situations, because those are all powerful, powerful tools that I see necessary in terms of being able to relate to another human being at their level.
Healing for me, and within the Indigenous teachings, it means healing everything: your physical, your mental, your emotional, and your spiritual. It means healing everything, as well as your community, and being more connected to the earth, to your surroundings, and to your environment.
It's becoming whole, because if you're missing all those bits and pieces of yourself, and you know you're not doing the work on yourself, and you're taking on somebody else's energies and somebody else's hard stuff, you're not there, you're not a full structure yet. So healing yourself and putting all those pieces back together will make you a sound person, so that you can go out into the community and help people.
Taking care of your well-being, your mind, your spirit, your physical body, your soul, caring for all those things is healing. Being able to use your medicines and knowing what the meaning of using them is, and finding what brings your spirit up, what lifts your spirit from being down here to up here.
It's providing us tools to be able to work with our clients. So it's not a matter of just sitting down and listening to a client, but being able to provide them with healing techniques through song, through dance, through our medicines, giving us those tools to work with them.
The medicine bags, the importance of, you know, our medicine bags. And it's done with teaching. I do teachings with it. And, you know, and the other thing is I help teach or share to make skirts, the old traditional skirts. And since November, I've done 7 workshops just making skirts. And the importance of us women wearing skirts, taking back our power within those skirts. And we're the center, and everything else is around us. And so there's many teachings that goes with the skirts. And even the men's ribbon shirts, you know, there's teachings that goes with that, and the importance of it. So those are some of the workshops that I do.
FNTI has been great with helping me discover my identity. It's provided a very safe place for me to learn. It's provided me to be able to create different relationships with other people. I've been able to gather mentors. They've given me tools that I haven't been able to have before. I grew up with not very much culture in my life, and coming here, they've been able to give me those tools and teachings and stuff that I haven't been able to receive within my community.
When we talk about Indigenous education, that's really what Indigenous education is all about, is to create a qualitative difference in the student at the end of the day, to look at the opportunity to have a transformative learning process within the institution, and to see that transformation take hold of the student to become an engaged learner and have the capacity to share that Indigenous knowledge with community and community members and society at large. The really unique opportunity when we talk about Indigenous education, oftentimes it's focused on looking at how do we address the so-called gap when it comes to Indigenous education. A lot of times they talk about this gap, and being around literacy and numeracy. And no question there needs to be an address of that, but oftentimes we're portrayed where Aboriginal education is here and the Canadian Educational Institute, or the dominant form of education, is here. And they talk about this gap that needs to be addressed in terms of literacy and numeracy. Yeah, that's true. But I mean, it comes down to the point that so many of our people are leaving school, and they're not dropping out of school, they're walking out of school. If education doesn't meet our requirements in community, then those students are making a conscious decision that they're not going to go. And so because of that, when they see no reflection of themselves, their culture, their history, their worldview embedded within education, those students are just simply walking out. The idea, I think, that to address that gap is to look at how do we develop culturally appropriate curriculum that's necessary to engage students, to raise the bar so that we can actually compete and create equity between our educational systems. The really unique opportunity is that when you do that, predicated on culture and Indigenous knowledge, and then allow that to be able to be fully articulated and fully engaged, now all of a sudden you raise the bar as to what it means to be not just an Indigenous person, but what it means to be a human being. And so the translation of those ideas and those concepts to the dominant education system within sociology, education, business, environment, health sciences, you name it, all of a sudden, you're beginning to raise the bar as to what it means to be a real human being within a context of coming to know and coming to understand your ability to live in place, the necessity of sustaining relations, of sustainability, of engagement, of having real learning, have transformative learning, so that we raise the bar together, creates a new type of consciousness within, I guess, our human reality to really understand what it means to be a human being in today's world. And at the same time, in a recognition of that within Canada, as an example, that what it means to really be a Canadian, and those high morals, those high values and principles, and those ethics, and that way of understanding and engaging with the world is really where Canada needs to see itself, period. But it's never going to get there unless it really begins to recognize the authority and the opportunity to engage with Indigenous knowledge, to raise the bar as to what it means to be a human being. At the end of the day, when a simple word like Ongwe Hongwe, the real human being, the original human being, that's what it's talking about. What does that mean to be a real human being, embedded within our language and our culture and our traditional ways of understanding? The articulation of that, that's what needs to be examined, researched, shared, and taught all around, so that becomes a process of transformative education that really, responds to what it means to be a human, really responds to not just community needs, but really human needs.
Currently, with the philosophy and understanding that we have here at FNTI, we're able to reach into First Nations communities and reach Indigenous people from across Canada. And our goal is to take this understanding, this philosophy, this knowing, and get it across, the world. And we can use our students as a catalyst to get that message out there. And I honestly believe that FNTI has an opportunity to get this kind of understanding and this knowledge out to the rest of the world. And to also bring that knowledge, you know, into our learners, to bring it to the learners so that they have a better understanding of what their responsibilities are for ensuring, you know, our lives as human beings continue.
Currently, I am a community wellness worker in my community at Wata. I work primarily with youth and children. I provide cultural activities for them to help build up their identity and their self-worth. We do that through leadership, we do it through crafts, we do it through art, we do it through singing, just running talking circles, being able to provide them with anything that I can so that they can express themselves through their culture. FNTI has been great with providing me with opportunities to bring stuff back for them so that I can provide more knowledge to them that they don't have within their community.
One of the really important and I think critical opportunities that FNTI and Aboriginal institutes in general have is to really have the ability to address the needs in community. A lot of times, you know, within larger academic institutions, be they colleges or universities, undergraduate or even at the graduate level, a lot of the times the processes are so embedded within this idea of academic freedom, of the institution itself, of the requirements to meet a particular degree or to meet a particular discipline within the institution, to meet the requirements. While that system is good and while it has produced, you know, brilliant scholars over the years, one of the things that's really missing is the ability for really key and critical foundational pieces to look at that are embedded within the language and the culture and our traditional teachings. This thing that we're calling around Indigenous knowledge is to bring out those ideas and those concepts to the forefront. That's the really unique opportunity that that FNTI and academic or Aboriginal institutes can provide. FNTI in particular, you know, has a unique capacity, being situated in community, to be responsive to the needs of community, to create responsive education that focuses on the depth of knowledge within our particular teachings, our cultures, our languages, our unique ways of life for not just us as Haudenosaunee people, but for peoples right across Ontario and hopefully, you know, maybe as time goes on across Canada.
Well, I have to go back to my own time going to school here, and I attended public school here and went to high school in Belleville, which is close by. And during those 12 years, there was never any cultural component to my learning process. So I was never able to really identify who I was as an Aboriginal person. And I think that's what we're able to provide to the learners that we're dealing with now, is that we provide them with a significant cultural component so they can learn about culture and learn about themselves and take that forward.
So when I think about, you know, an institution like FNTI, I remember growing up in the 80s and going to a mainstream high school and then going to a mainstream university. There were no photographs of elders on the wall. There was no smell of sweetgrass when you walked in. For me, there was, you know, the picture of the Queen and really kind of Eurocentric design. I think about FNTI not only in terms of the content of the curriculum taught, but I also think about the design principles, you know, what the new building will look like and how we need to design our values and need to design our way of looking at the world, so our ontologies and epistemologies. I think those are important, whether it's architecture, you know, the color scheme of things, the selection of materials for classrooms. All of that's really important because that was, you know, often in mainstream institutions, that's kind of from a Eurocentric perspective. We need to be able to move tables around and to sit in circle. We need to be able to go out on the land. And I think that's really, you know, an important part of making people feel quite welcomed, included, and to feel proud, because their way of seeing things is the norm here. And that feels great.
My experience being here versus going to university has been very unique. Learning in a Western setting, you're behind a desk with a teacher in the front and you're just a number. When you come to FNTI, it's very personal. Everybody knows everybody. Your teacher sits at the same level as you. You're always in circle. So you have that connection, you have that flow constantly while you're here. You're not just a number.
The difference is that I found, again, and no disrespect, but I found the mainstream educational process as being very impersonal. You're given lots of information. Of course, you're given an education, but it's very impersonal. And the strength of the FNTI program is that it's very, very personal. You're in a setting where you're encouraged to be who you are. The cultural advisor and oftentimes the instructors, you get to know you very, very well, because it's designed to get to know each other very, very well. That's that holistic approach again, is understanding our relationships and understanding healthy relationships as well. And that's what, again, is the strength of the FNTI program, is that we infuse cultural identity. We infuse personal stories. We value them as a learning tool. And so that really personalizes my experience in the FNTI program. And that was my experience when I did the SSW program back in the 1990s, late 1990s. It was a whole different educational process that I had never really been a part of before, but certainly have been over these last 4 years. And I see that as being one of the strengths, amongst others, of this FNTI educational process.
Well, personally, I like it because that they do incorporate Aboriginal culture and beliefs, and they put that in with the program. And being of Aboriginal background, that's what I like specifically, because you don't get to learn that anywhere else. And that it's a smaller class, so you get more one-on-one time with the instructors, and there's not a lot of pressure.
It's important because not many schools have the Aboriginal content. Most of the schools, they are very good schools, but they don't have that aspect, that component in the programs. And that's one of the main reasons why I'm taking the courses here.
Traditionally, FNTI's success rate is very high, higher than any of the mainstream universities or colleges in Ontario. So last year was 87%. So that was 87% of our learners in college programs. 87% of our learners that started in a college program graduated successfully.
So when we were doing some of the exercises this week, when we were mapping the systems, for example, and I was, looking at examples throughout, because there's a tendency for people to, and I think this is a natural thing for human beings, is, where do I fit in, and am I contributing to the overall goal, and to think that something more technical, like corporate services, for example, or IT, is that as important as an instructor, for example? And it is. In systems thinking, everything is important, and how you embody a commitment to an Indigenous way of doing things is actually in your business principles, in the way that you factor in, for example, holiday time, how much time you get off for grieving, in typical HR policies. So one of the examples that was given here is about the HR policies is the Employee Assistance Program. So that's EAPs. I used to work at a mainstream nonprofit, and an EAP was a 1-800 number to talk to a non-Indigenous psychologist who had no understanding of what life was like in an Indigenous community. And here, when someone is accessing the EAP program, which is usually for support, for something they're coping with, they can talk to a traditional healer or can talk to an elder. And that's really important. That's an example of how an institution like FNTI can start to embody that commitment to a cultural way of doing things, including, I guess for lack of a better term, a cultural way of doing business. You know, we have to conduct business. There are certain legal requirements and things for operating something like a nonprofit organization. But a good example are like B Corps, you know, corporations that are committed to sustainability efforts, for example, and they can report on that. And I think that's something that FNTI can do proudly, can report on how some of their decision making, some of their policies, and the way that they're approaching, you know, the running of the organization can be reported on quite proudly as being specific to this place and culture.
Yes, we have a set of board policies, and it's outlined very specifically in that number of policies what we expect the president to do, what our role is as a board, and we also outline some of the risks that we do not want to take. So we have a number of policies that outline for the president the things that she is not to expose us to. And we also have, well, we have the usual annual audit by outside auditors. And again, there's a number of checks and balances that are put upon us by our funders that we have to report back to the provincial and federal governments about how our programs are unfolding and where the money is being spent.
Yeah, so the high success rate of our students completing, it's the whole package. I mean, it's part of it's, you know, we try to only admit students that are ready, but the delivery model is key. It allows people to manage their time a bit better, I think. It allows them to maintain their commitments to family and work. That's a big piece of students being successful. Our approach to admissions and retention, that's a big piece of it. We're getting a lot more students that are, once we started offering you know, financial literacy engagement with staff, that was a big piece of it. Our student success folks are doing a lot of work in looking at wellness supports, so connecting students with mental health supports and community supports. But a big piece of it is our instructors and the way they approach the students and the pedagogy in the classroom.
The level of the education that our students get is at the cutting edge. And I think that's really important for our students to have an understanding that their skill level, their experiences are portable and that they can take them wherever they want to go. And wherever they want to go will only be limited to how they see themselves in regard to where they want to go, I guess. You know, I don't want to limit it to them. I really encourage them to look at all possibilities and you know, make application.
It's easy, it's rudimentary, let's call it, to look at developing metrics to success around issues of employment or income or family size or bank account. It's easy to do that, but it's rudimentary in its nature. What we need to talk about is really looking at programs and curriculum that we develop and programs that we initiate here at FNTI that have a real positive impact on the long-term well-being of our people. If it will reduce and eliminate, and again, that's the key, between many of the things that the larger academic processes do, they learn to address particular symptoms without going back to the root causes. We're not only interested in addressing symptoms of, let's call it, you know, mental health and addictions, use this as an example. We're not just interested in addressing those symptoms of reducing the numbers of people that are impacted by mental health and reducing a number of addictions in community. We're actually interested in being able to eliminate them from our communities. So the elimination of them, you know, takes a long process to be able to look at, but the metrics can be, you know, really, I want to call it, can be constructed in a way that we're only limited by our imaginations. So as an example, when we introduce a traditional foods program and we teach students and we engage with students not only the physical production of the food, but also the spiritual, relational engagement with those foods. And we take food, ceremonies, we take the earth, we take all of creation, and we bring those things together. While that may sound like, a very complex, and it is, a very complex educational programming, let's translate that into what does that do for the rates of diabetes in the community? What does it do for the rates of, even the need for a food bank in the community? What does it do for the rates of children staying in school and having enough food to be able to go to school and feed themselves with their lunch and their breakfast and dinner? What does it do for families and family social dysfunction, and how does it bring the family together? All of those markers can easily be, I want to call it quantitatively recorded, but then at the same time, you have this qualitative opportunity to be able to address that, where you talk about how do you feel as a human being? What do you think about your family? What are you thinking about your education? What are you thinking about your role in the community? How do you see yourself as a person of well-being? Looking at those ideas and concepts to measure, I guess, human engagement, human integrity, and then at the same time looking at the quantitative aspect of it, is looking at what is the condition of the community now as opposed to 10 years ago. What will it be 10 years into the future? What will it be 20 years into the future as we continue to eliminate those issues and problems that are confronting us? So I like to say, introducing a traditional foods program as an example, creates the opportunity to eliminate diabetes from our communities in one generation. Man, think about what that means and what that could be as far as cost savings are concerned to us when we are investing so much money in being able to maintain health care and health-related issues. And that's only one issue, diabetes, but look at the monies that were being put into that, as opposed to spending that same money on education, social programming, support structures, all the different things necessary to sustain the community, energy, all the different things that we need to be able to be self-sufficient again.
Well, I think the vision was that we would, at some point in time, be able to give accreditation to some of our programs, and we're there. We wanted to stabilize their funding, and we're getting there. Right now our funding is mainly from the provincial government, but we want to work with the federal government to get them involved and provide funding, and not just to provide funding, but so that they can be supportive of how important education is for Aboriginal people.
I think the goal of FNTI, I think as the mission and vision begin a process of change and evolution over time, they'll be recognized as one of the world leaders in creating that kind of positive change. But even if that is like pie in the sky and that's really blue sky kind of hoping, the worst that's going to happen is that we make fully functional, fully engaged, happy, healthy, vibrant human beings that create happy, vibrant families that are empowered, that achieve health and wellness, that enjoy peace and love, that create vibrant, sustainable communities again. That's the worst that's going to happen. And those communities then take care of the places that they're living and share that knowledge with others so that we have rich biodiversity and we have clean air, clean water, vibrant and abundant biodiversity and abundant biological life that's around us. If that's the lowest common denominator, I'm happy with that. So, but at the same time, when you think about the opportunities that as they present themselves, we not only have the capacity to change our communities, but we have the capacity to change the world. So anywhere on that spectrum, I'm happy.